The invasion began at dawn. For one terrible moment, the world stood still. Then the sky ignited. Massive alien warships, thousands of them, descended from orbit, their engines screaming like the wailing of the damned. Plasma bombardments erased entire cities in seconds. Skyscrapers crumbled like sandcastles in a storm. Billions of lives vanished beneath the fury of a species that thought humanity would kneel. They were wrong. The invaders, known as the Zarquin Dominion, had ruled the stars for 10,000 years. They had crushed entire civilizations beneath their iron grip. They believed Earth would be the same. But as the first wave of their invasion forces landed, a single chilling message was broadcast from deep within the ruins of humanity's last stronghold. A message that would haunt the Zarquin for eternity. You have sealed your fate. The war was about to begin. And the Zarquin had no idea what they had just unleashed. The fall of the first cities. Los Angeles was the first to die. A supercarrier, larger than any human city, hovered above it, unleashing a storm of fire. Skyscrapers melted. The Pacific boiled. Millions perished in an instant. Moscow fell next. Then Beijing. Then London. One by one, Earth's great cities were erased from existence. But humanity did not surrender. From underground bunkers, hidden military bases, and deep space stations, the survivors fought back. Washington, D.C., the final broadcast center. A skeleton crew of technicians and soldiers worked feverishly inside a reinforced bunker beneath the ruins of the White House. They had one job: to deliver Earth's final message before the enemy found them. General Elias Carter, bloodied and exhausted, stood in front of the camera. His uniform was torn. His face was streaked with soot. But his eyes burned with defiance. The technician gave him a nod. "We're live, sir." Carter straightened. And then, with the full weight of humanity behind him, he spoke. "To the Zarquin Dominion? You came to our world expecting surrender. You came to our world expecting fear. But you made one mistake." He stepped closer to the camera. "You didn't kill us fast enough." Earth strikes back. Across the ruined planet, pockets of survivors listened to his words. In the tunnels beneath New York, resistance fighters armed themselves. On hidden orbital platforms, human engineers prepared their last weapons. In deep space colonies, sleeper fleets awoke from hibernation. The Zarquin thought Earth was finished. It wasn't. It was just getting started. And for the first time in 10,000 years, the Zarquin felt fear. The last stand. The sky above Earth was a graveyard of burning ships. The Zarquin had expected an easy victory. Instead, they found a war they weren't prepared to fight. Humans had turned their own world into a battlefield. Entire cities were rigged with explosives. Spaceports were converted into anti-aircraft fortresses. Civilian freighters, packed with nuclear warheads, crashed into alien command ships. And one by one, the invaders began to die. Washington, D.C., the final hour. The bunker's reinforced doors exploded inward. Carter turned. Zarquin warriors, towering, armored creatures with razor-sharp limbs, stormed in. They expected him to beg. Instead, Carter smiled. And as he pressed a final command on the control panel, the screen behind him lit up. "Earth's final transmission has been sent." The Zarquin leader snarled. "What have you done?" Carter's grin widened. "You'll see soon enough." And as the Zarquin raised their weapons, the screen went black. The end of the beginning. Across the galaxy, hundreds of human sleeper fleets received the message. Deep space stations activated their doomsday weapons. The Zarquin Dominion had won the first battle. But the war was far from over. And the last words of Earth would forever be remembered in the stars. "You have sealed your fate." The first wave of human resistance was dead. But the second was just getting started. After the transmission, the Zarquin commander, Supreme War Leader Cavero, stood frozen, staring at the blank transmission screen. The human general's last words still echoed in his mind. "You didn't kill us fast enough." And now, the human fleets they weren't supposed to have, were awakening from the darkness of deep space. The battle for Earth had been costly. But the war for the galaxy was only beginning. Survivors of the storm. Deep beneath the shattered ruins of New York City, a hidden resistance base came to life. Power hummed. Computers flickered back online. Generators rumbled. General Elias Carter's final broadcast had been a signal, a summons. And every surviving human who heard it understood exactly what it meant. The fight wasn't over. It was just changing. Humanity's next move. Commander Leila Torres, once a fighter pilot, now a leader of the underground resistance, studied the holographic display inside the ruined subway station. The Zarquin still controlled the surface. But below the streets, in the tunnels, in the sewers, in the ashes of human civilization, the resistance was growing. Scattered forces from every continent had survived. And now, with the transmission rallying them, Earth was preparing its counterstrike. Her earpiece crackled. "Taurus," a voice came through. "We found one of their supply ships. Unguarded." She smiled. "Then let's remind these bastards that humanity doesn't die easy." The Zarquin's first mistake. For 10,000 years, the Zarquin had ruled uncontested. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had crushed countless rebellions. But never before had they encountered a species like humans. They thought the war was already won. That was their mistake. Because while they stood on the surface, basking in their so-called victory, humanity was already digging its claws into their exposed throat. And when humanity strikes back, it doesn't stop until the enemy is dead. Operation Revenant. The first human counterstrike happened 3 days after Earth's final transmission. The target? A Zarquin command ship, floating above the ruins of Washington, D.C. It was supposed to be untouchable. It was supposed to be impenetrable. But the Zarquin didn't realize something. The humans had already figured out their weaknesses. The attack. The assault came from below. A team of resistance fighters, no more than 30 strong, hijacked a downed Zarquin transport. Using the enemy's own clearance codes, they bluffed their way into the command ship's hangar. And once inside, they let hell loose. Grenades, pulse rifles, plasma cutters. The Zarquin, caught off guard, had no time to react. In under 10 minutes, the humans had seized control of the enemy's communications array. And then they did something no species had ever dared. They hijacked the entire Zarquin war network. The new signal. Across every occupied city, every Zarquin ship, every war camp, a new transmission crackled to life. Not one of surrender. Not one of fear. But a message of vengeance. And the face on the screen? A human. Layla Torres stood before the camera, blood-streaked but unbroken. "You thought we were finished? You thought you could wipe us out?" She leaned in. Her eyes burned. "We are humanity. And we are coming for you." The screen flickered. And then every stolen human warship, every hidden military bunker, every surviving soldier across the stars, got the signal. The war had only just begun. The Zarquin had come to Earth expecting a massacre. They got one. But now it was their turn to burn. Because Earth had sent its final transmission. And now, the galaxy would never forget what came next. The invasion had become a war. The war had become a massacre. But not in the way the Zarquin had expected. The mighty Dominion Armada, once an unstoppable force, now burned above a planet they thought would be easy prey. They had miscalculated. And humanity was making them pay. The beginning of the end. Inside the hijacked Zarquin command ship, Layla Torres stood over the control console, her breath steady despite the chaos around her. "Status," she barked. A resistance fighter, barely more than a teenager, looked up from a Zarquin terminal. His fingers were slick with alien blood. "The network's ours," he said. "We're feeding false fleet movements into their command structure. The Dominion's forces are firing on each other." Layla's lips curled into a grin. "The bastards thought we were just primitive apes playing at war." She slammed a command into the console. Every hacked signal, every fake distress call, every sabotaged order, all of it pushed the Zarquin further into chaos. "And now," she looked up, "we show them what humans do best. We survive. We adapt. And we win." The battle for the stars. Orbit above Earth had become a slaughterhouse. Zarquin battleships, once majestic and invincible, were being torn apart. The sleeper fleets that had received Earth's final transmission had arrived. They came from the cold void. Ghost ships. Ships long thought lost, waiting in hidden asteroid fields and deep space stations for this very moment. Now they descended on Earth like avenging demons. And they did not fight with mercy. Annihilation-class dreadnoughts, ships built in secret by exiled human warlords, unleashed hyperkinetic slugs that ripped through the Zarquin hulls like paper. Gravity bombs detonated, sending ripples through space, crushing alien warships under their own mass. And then, from deep space, something even worse arrived. The Titan wakes. The Zarquin fleet had spent most of its firepower trying to conquer Earth. They had never expected to be attacked from behind. That was why they never saw it coming. A warship 5 times larger than anything the Zarquin had ever built, emerged from the shadow of Jupiter's largest moon. It was human. and it was hungry for blood. The USS Revenant. Its name was the Revenant, a legendary warship, built in defiance of interstellar treaties, hidden away for this exact moment. Its first and only mission was about to begin. Inside the bridge, Admiral Jonathan Raines stood with his arms folded. He had spent his entire career preparing for this day. Now, it was here. Fire at will, he said. And the Revenant opened fire. The fall of the Zarquin fleet. It wasn't a battle. It was a reckoning. The Revenant's super-heavy railguns spat out slugs the size of buildings, each one moving at near-relativistic speeds. When they hit the Zarquin dreadnoughts, the result was apocalyptic. Entire ships were punched clean through. Fleets shattered in seconds. The Zarquin realized too late that they had never fought a species like humans. A species that, when pushed to the brink, didn't just fight back. It erased its enemies from existence. Earth's counterattack. The Zarquin ground forces, those that had survived the orbital strikes, were now trapped, cut off, isolated. And humanity was coming for them. Layla Torres led the charge. From the ruined subways of New York to the bombed-out wastelands of Beijing, human resistance fighters emerged like ghosts from the ashes. They were outnumbered, outgunned, exhausted. And yet, they hunted the Zarquin like wolves. There was no escape. For every human that fell, 10 Zarquin warriors were burned to ash. This was not a battle anymore. It was extermination. A species unbroken. The Zarquin had come to conquer a planet. Instead, they had awakened a nightmare. And as the last of their warships fell to Earth's guns, the Dominion leaders sent one final desperate message back to their homeworld. A message filled with terror. We were wrong about the humans. We were so wrong. Send help. Send everything. Before it's too late. But it already was. Because Earth's final transmission was not just a warning. It was a promise. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. Humanity was coming to finish the job. Next stop, the Zarquin homeworld. The war had changed. Earth was no longer defending itself. Now, it was on the offensive. And for the first time in 10,000 years, the Zarquin Dominion was afraid. The Zarquin Dominion had ruled the stars for 10,000 years. They had crushed empires, burned civilizations to ash, broken the wills of entire species. They believed themselves invincible. But they had never fought humans. And now, as the last of their war fleets disintegrated above Earth, as their forces were slaughtered in the streets, as their homeworld received the final, chilling transmission, they realized the truth. They weren't the predators anymore. They were the prey. And humanity was coming to finish the job. A new war begins. Inside the bridge of the USS Revenant, Admiral Jonathan Raines stood at the command console, watching the carnage unfold. The Zarquin fleet had been decimated. Survivors? A handful of broken ships limping through space, broadcasting desperate distress signals. Raines narrowed his eyes. No mercy. Send pursuit squadrons, he ordered. Hunt them down. No survivors. His officers nodded. They understood. This war had started as a fight for survival. Now it was a war of extinction. And humanity intended to win. Layla's last stand. On the surface, Layla Torres stood in the ruins of Washington, D.C., her rifle still hot from battle. The final Zarquin garrison had fallen. Bodies littered the streets, alien and human alike. But for the first time since the invasion began, Earth was free. A broken, bleeding freedom, but freedom nonetheless. She activated her comms. All units, this is Torres. The planet is ours. A moment of silence, then cheers erupted across every channel. But Layla wasn't celebrating. She turned her gaze skyward. Beyond the stars lay the Zarquin homeworld. And humanity's next target. Retaliation Fleet Omega. 1 week later, the largest human fleet in history left the shattered orbit of Earth. Hundreds of warships, dreadnoughts, carriers, battleships, cruisers, all refitted with Zarquin technology stolen during the war. They weren't just going to invade. They were going to erase the Dominion from existence. And at the heart of the fleet, the USS Revenant led the way. Admiral Raines stood before the crew. Today, he said, we stop being the hunted. Today we become the monsters in the dark. The fleet vanished into the void, heading for the Zarquin homeworld. And when they arrived, no mercy, no surrender, only fire and death. The end of an empire. The Zarquin High Council watched in horror as their sensors detected the human fleet approaching. Impossible, one of the warlords whispered. They should have been eradicated. But the transmission from Earth still echoed through the Dominion's command networks. You have sealed your fate. And now fate had arrived. The first human railgun volley struck the planetary shields. They held for 3 seconds. Then they collapsed. The last broadcast. As fire rained from the sky, as human shock troops stormed the Zarquin capital, as their last defenders were cut down, a single transmission was sent to the remaining Dominion colonies. A transmission filled with panic. We made a mistake. We should have never gone to Earth. The humans, they don't stop. But by then, it was too late. The Zarquin had ruled for 10,000 years. Humanity had erased them in 10 days. The galaxy reborn. The war was over. But the legend of humanity had only just begun. For the first time in history, the galaxy knew fear. Because somewhere, in the dark, humanity was watching. Waiting. And the next species foolish enough to threaten Earth would never live long enough to regret it. If you loved this story, hit like and subscribe, because this is only the beginning of humanity's legend.